Estuaries are vitally important because they are a high source of biodiversity, water resources, and because an estuary gets influenced both by freshwater and saltwater, it creates this highly dynamic ecosystem, and a lot of diversity is concentrated around estuaries. Because we utilize it as well, we need to make sure that the estuaries are maintained in a healthy condition. The estuary changes within a day from almost like no water at all to almost completely flooding, depending on your tide height, how much rain has come down. Because you get both that saltwater and freshwater influence, the species that occupy estuaries have to be incredibly adaptable to range of salinities in a very short period of time. So these animals that live here are highly adapted to that varying ecosystem. Because the estuary is influenced both by freshwater and the ocean, the influence of tides are very important on the functioning of the estuary. So it's actually what's known as tidal flushing that underlines the whole process, and it's basically the tides pushing water, salt water, into the ecosystem, and then on low tide pulling that salt water back out again and pulling fresh water through. So we go to the estuary every week to measure the water quality. 3 parameters that we mainly look at in this situation is oxygen, salinity and temperature. Now, each of these parameters is important for the functioning of the environment. So obviously you and I, we need to breathe, and so do the fish that live in the water. So when we measure the dissolved oxygen concentration in the water, we're looking at anywhere from say 3.5 to 4 milligrams per liter and upwards, which means there's just enough oxygen in the water. If we measure it and we see that the oxygen levels have dropped below those values, then it means that there's an underlying problem in the ecosystem. And if nothing is done to correct that, you could get fish die-offs in the estuaries. Salinity is also important because even though that the animals that live here are highly adapted to a wide range of salinities, anywhere from freshwater 0 to ocean levels of salinity, such as about 33 to 35 parts per thousand. If situations occur where, for example, we have a drought and there's like a lot of evaporation happening, salt concentration actually increases past 35 parts per thousand. Animals living in this ecosystem are not adapted to that. Like, that's an extreme threshold that we don't want to cross. But we also have to keep in mind like variations in salinity during certain times of the year. During the rainy season, the salinity will shoot up and down much more than during the dry season, where it will remain a lot more consistent. And we look at the bird diversity as a vector within this. So we need to make sure that what we measure over the long term remains within boundaries. And if those boundaries are crossed, then we know that there's something wrong with the estuary. However, the continuous monitoring that we do allows us to find out if or when to take action. It's a very dynamic ecosystem as well, so it also depends very much on how much rainfall has fallen in the last couple of weeks, what is your tide height level, all of those situations. But it's also factors that we have to consider and we have to look after, and we can't just go one day in a year, or it's something that needs to be consistently looked at.